I'm Kelly.
And I'm Haley.
Welcome to the Whole Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are very excited for our guest speaker. My name is Haley Korf. I'm your vision impaired host. And we have Kelly.
Good to see everybody.
And our host, yes, please take it away. Our guest speaker is Keith Kirkland. We are so excited. Keith, you and I have spoken a lot in the past, but I wanted to let everybody know a little bit more about what you do and what kind of drives you to do some of the things that you do. So could you please tell everyone a little bit more about your different experiences?
Yeah. And so I'm currently a product design professor at the Kansas City Art Institute. I'm here as the Linda Pryor Fellow, sponsored by the Hearst Foundation, to touch on one of the main areas that Kansas City Art Institute has defined as really important for us: inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and sustainability. And outside of that, previously, I was running a company for 8 years, building technology for the blind and visually impaired. I'm using navigation and haptics. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then now I'm working on a new company where I'm trying to reimagine the physical therapy space using gamification and technology.
Interesting. That's a lot to unpack. Okay. And it's above my pay grade. I'm not sure if I understand it. So maybe we could break it down in some of the questions we have.
Sounds great.
Okay. So real quick, on the list here, it says that your background is mechanical engineer, accessible design, industrial design, and haptics. So I feel like that's kind of what you were talking about. Accessory design. My apologies.
Yes.
Vision impaired. Okay. It's bound to happen, guys. Thank you for bearing with me. So you were talking a little bit more about your physical therapy thing. I don't think we have any questions about that on here. Did you want to speak about that right now, or just is it too new?
It's super new. I can talk a little bit about it. So,
Okay.
the thing that got me into my original startup with blind navigation was actually my master's program when I was at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. For industrial design there, I was trying to build a suit that would allow a person to download Kung Fu, and the suit would teach them using vibrations.
Yes.
So that was my whole opening into the world of haptics. Haptic means of or relating to the sense of touch, for all of those who happen not to know what that word means. Nothing personal. No one knows what that word means.
Nope.
And what we were doing is crap, totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay. You were talking about the suit and how it provides vibrations for individuals for Kung Fu possibilities?
Yes. And so ideally what I was trying to do is so I come from the fashion industry. I had a previous degree in mechanical engineering, and then I didn't want to do that anymore. And then I went back to school and became like a shoe designer.
Okay.
And then, ended up in handbags, working for like Calvin Klein and Coach and Le Sportsac.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then I was like, wow, I love the fashion industry, but also too, like at the time, it was 2012, and the fashion industry was the second largest polluter next to the oil industry. And so I decided to go back to school because I wanted to look for ways to use design to help forward humanity.
Wow.
But after I got done, I was like, wow, I miss fashion so much. How can I get back into this? Right? And so I realized like, well, I have fashion, but also I have a background in technology. So when I combined those together, I got wearable tech. But then when I looked, I was like, it wasn't quite specific enough because wearable tech could have me designing things that I wasn't interested in designing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I built this concept that I call now, that I teach actually to some organizations and to my students, called Your 3 Words. So I added a third word in there to reduce the possibilities so that everything that would be in that sphere would be exciting for me.
Okay.
And that third word that I added, I realized it was movement. I had practiced Kung Fu when I was a kid, 13 or 14 years old. I started learning. I've done a lot of martial arts. I've never mastered any of them. I've done a lot of them. So I've done capoeira, I've done Kung Fu, I've done Kendo, Japanese sword fighting. I've done Kyudo, Japanese archery. And all these styles, I picked up skateboarding on my 33rd birthday, but I also have lots of injuries from learning all these different movements. And so
Yeah.
what I was looking at is like, is there a way to help a person who's interested in learning a movement learn that movement more safely so that they continue doing that movement for as long as they can. Because at the end of the day, if you love Kung Fu, if you love skateboarding, if you love riding your bike, like you want to get back to the thing that you really love.
Right.
Mhm.
Wow. That's huge. That's an interesting concept.
It was
And
fun.
above my pay grade. I don't, like I said, I don't fully understand it. So I'm going to ask you to break down a lot of things. Okay.
Yeah, this is great.
Cool. Okay. Kelly, did you want to ask the next question so I don't trip over my words?
Sure. So the Leonard Pryor's Fellowship, that's brings in like a lot of what you're doing right now. Can you explain a little more about that? And yeah.
Yeah, so the Leonard Pryor Fellowship was created by the Kansas City Art Institute. It was in response to, Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd incident. The students wanted the university to take action. And so what the university did is they created the Ideas Council. And so I am the chair of the Ideas Council, and we have an organization that is focused 3 students, 3 faculty, 3 staff. And our goal is to how do we elevate these conversations that are in the area of ideas, again, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and sustainability, to from the students to the administration, vice versa. How do we facilitate those conversations? And so, as the Leonard Pryor Fellow, they wanted an artist to come in who represented some portion of the ideas part, and I was selected because of my background in accessibility.
Oh, wow. Is that a new, the Leonard Pryor Fellowship, is that a new concept then?
Yes,
Okay.
very, very new. I think I was the first one. I think
Wow.
Wow.
So you really get to
Awesome.
shape like how it looks and figure out what you like and don't like and how to move forward.
exactly. But you know what? Like coming from startup land, it's kind of like I'm always the very first person who ever does the thing that is being done. So I've gotten quite comfortable with the discomfort.
Uh-huh.
I understand that. I do. Yes. Yes. That kind of leads into our next question though. How's your role at KCAI shaping inclusivity and accessibility within the college and the broader community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think kind of like we can tackle it from a few different points. So first is kind of like the direct impact of just like working with students and bringing some of these concepts to their work. So one of the things that excited me to come to Kansas City and leave my home in Brooklyn was that when I was running my previous startup, I realized there was a really big educational gap. Haptics was still very unknown word, and but there's more of it being done. And what I realized was that we had raised $1.5 million with my previous startup, and I'm telling my investors we're going to be $1 billion company, right? Because that's the only reason they'll give me money. And to be $1 billion company, I need lots of employees, and I need lots of employees who know what haptics are. But there was no educational program. I'm not gonna say no educational program. You have human computer interaction, which is, like the program that you can do to focus a bit on haptics, but human computer interaction covers a lot of areas, right? But if you go to school for graphic design, you don't study music, right? You
Mhm.
study only graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to build a haptic specific experience. And I wanted to see, because the other thing is that, human computer interaction is usually offered at the master's and the PhD level. Um, I'm sure there are some undergraduate programs, but most of the people I know in the HCI space have masters and PhDs. And, PhDs and master degrees are really expensive if you're trying to start a company, right?
Yeah.
And so, but meanwhile, General Assembly comes along and you can get a UX designer educated in 9 to 12 months. So I started to look at like, how are we going to tackle this challenge of being able to, because, as a designer, I spent 2 years learning how the eye processes color information, how the brain processes color information,
Oh,
and how to use that color information to get you to look at the things I want you to look at, the things I'm designing, right? You learn physiology. That was part of our program, right? So,
interesting.
but, again, like, and if you go to school for music, right, you have to understand how how the brain processes
Mm.
sound, right? It's a really important part. And so, you know, I had the opportunity to build and create, like one of the first classes for haptics that was one aimed at undergraduates, and two were aimed at non-technical majors.
Hmm.
Because the whole thing is that like I found out the word haptic when I was 33, and I changed my whole life. How many people in the middle of their third degree program would completely change everything that they were doing to pursue some word that they just found out about. And meanwhile, though, I learned the word artist at 6. I learned engineer at 12.
Hmm.
That's how I became an artist, and that's how I became an engineer. So my goal is if we introduce these concepts to people in their undergraduate education, then when these people grow, they know what haptic means. They know how to use it. And when they're in companies and it's like, hey, we should try to implement haptics, like all of a sudden the possibilities become there. And more importantly, as we get more and more implementation, we now have the ability to have people who have the education around it. And so my dream is to build a 4-year program dedicated explicitly to haptics. We're a bit far off from that. So I wanted to start with a class, and KCAI said, hey, you come here, you can teach anything you want. I was like, anything?
Oh my gosh.
And so,
Bet.
and so now I've been here for 2 years. We're actually in the second round of the haptics course. It's transformed from purely haptics to wearables and haptics.
Okay.
Because most of the time haptics are, they're vibration based or they're
Hmm.
tactile based. And so they need to be in contact with your body.
Hmm.
That contact can be temporary when you extend out, or, a lot of times like your Apple Watch or your phone in your pocket, it can live on you
Hmm.
and communicate information constantly. So right now, we've doubled the class size from the previous. We started with 7 students. Like now we have close to 13. And like the other part too that was really interesting is the demographic shift. Is when I first came in, of course, most of the students were in product design because that's where I teach. But as this time around, I only have 2 product design students, and like I almost have like a Noah's Ark of like 2 people from most of the majors in the campus: ceramics, painting, sculpture, fiber. Really interested in exploring these ideas of how do you communicate information through a different sense. And I think that like part of it is about accessibility. And I have a lot of people in the disability space, students who have family members, who are blind or, who've touched that space in themselves in some kind of way. But even more people it's just a new way of expression. And I think that's where you're going to get the coolest stuff because, like when a musician is making a song, he doesn't have to think about like what's the song going to look like. I mean, kind of, you have to do the video, right?
Hmm.
But like he doesn't have to have that as the primary goal in his head. But like every person who's designing haptics has to be like, well, what are the visuals and what are the audio? Because there are very few purely haptic experiences. They're usually like, oh, you get a vibration and a sound and a visual, right?
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward to like getting so well versed in the haptic space that people are creating haptics for the sake of haptic expression. I think that's when we really kind of grow the space and bring the sense of touch into the digital economy.
Yeah, that'll help out a lot with many different disabilities, I feel like even.
Hmm.
Mhm. Um, let's see here. Because we got so many good questions. I don't want to like miss out on anything. Kelly, did you want to ask the next question? I think it was number 4. Oh, we
Well,
kind of
we
already
touched
done
on
that.
the haptics. So,
Do you want to ask number 5?
sure.
Okay.
So you said we need to bring touch into the digital world. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for haptics in accessibility?
Yeah. So, like right now, the current digital ecosystem is audio and visual, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
when you plug in your
Hmm.
VCR back in the day, it had 2 cables, right? It had the audio and it had the visual, right?
Uh-huh.
But humans have 5 senses, right?
Hmm.
I mean, some might argue 6, but let's not go there for the moment. Let's say 5 senses we have. Um, and when you're looking at how much content we're consuming digitally, what you're getting
So
is
much.
you're getting an overload of communication
Mhm.
through just 40% of the human capacity to understand information. Now, smell is a little bit far off, right? So is taste, from a digitization point of view. I know people who are working in the startup space on those solutions. So they're coming, definitely. But touch is right there, right? And one of the biggest things, if you look at over the last 100 years, over research dollars spent over the 5 senses, you'll see really, really clear trends. We spent most of the money on vision.
Mhm.
Like, we spent, I mean, not even a quarter on sound, but still way more on sound than anything else, right? And then touch, smell, and taste are basically like, touch is
Mhm.
coming up, right? But there's so big opportunities. There's such a big opportunity to bring in more of the human capacity to sense. And what that does is, one, it relieves the senses that are predominantly communicated with. So, like, If you think of like how many visual icons are on a screen, or how many different sounds you need to listen to from a machine, right? That's because you can only communicate stuff through audio and visual, right? So, but if you had a third, imagine a highway. The digital superhighway has two lanes right now. One is sight and one is sound. My proposition is let's build a third lane. Because what that does is one, it allows some of the information that didn't need to be communicated visually anyway, or audioly anyway, to have a space that they can live in. Second, like you think about the skin, it's the largest organ on the body, but most of the time, what is it doing? Like detecting the temperature and maybe your butt in the chair, right? So it's like this a huge capacity because the pixel was a thing that was invented. We invented the pixel to communicate with vision.
Mhm.
So it's like, and we built that pixel-based language, call it, air quotes. No one can see me. And so, like we built that pixel-based language. So the opportunity for touch is what kinds of experiences, could be offloaded to the touch sense that might be more interactive. Like think about driving. Do you really need to look back behind the mirror? What if you could just feel that there was a car behind you?
Oh my
What if you had
gosh.
driving spidey sense,
Yeah,
right?
that'd be
We have all
very
this.
neat.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We have all the sensors in the cars to do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If we just most cars even actually have haptics. So it's like you just put the haptics in the car that connect the two together and design that experience. All of a sudden, while you're driving, you extend your body to the car, and now the car becomes a physical part of you.
Hmm.
Right now, that's
Wow.
super esoteric, right? From a point of view of like how you land more home with this, right? In my previous startup, WearWorks, now called Haptic, we were looking at the challenges of navigation, right? 1 billion people use navigation apps every single month.
Hmm.
Like, but like when we first started, and I was trying to tell people like, hey, wow, you're constantly looking at your phone, like you're missing the world.
Hmm.
And I would have to spend a half hour convincing people with vision why looking at a map was even a problem. Felt like Henry Ford, like they would have asked for a faster horse.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was such a paradigm shift that people couldn't understand how it was even possible. And so we started doing is we looked at it, and it was very simple. It's like, hey, you're either right or you're wrong. And if you're wrong, you're some varying degree of wrong. What if when you walk in the right way, you don't feel anything, and the minute you turn off, you get a tiny vibration?
Hmm.
And then what if that vibration would get louder the wronger you were, so that you knew how much you need to correct yourself, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it was basically taking the game of hot and cold and turning it into a tactile experience. It was so simple, but it was so powerful that we were able to help the first person run the New York City Marathon for the first 15 miles without needing a sighted assistant.
Hmm. I was going to ask
Wow.
you about that as a follow up to this. Interesting. And so, was it like a watch that it was communicating that to him? Was it his phone? How did that work?
Yeah, so we built what we called the Wayband.
Hmm.
It was a haptic wristband that connected to your phone, and then
Hmm.
we built the mapping application called Haptic Nav. Um, the Haptic Nav is in the App Store right now. It's totally free to download. We're on beta in the Google Play Store, so feel free to try it out. And
Yeah.
initially, we had it just the band, and we had the map. But then what we realized is like we were talking to people who were blind and visually impaired, and this was kind of like where like really like the discrepancies around the challenges around employment and income, and
Hmm.
those issues started to show up. Where it's like, hey, I had a person who was blind. I was like, I get paid $750 a month on SSI. I can't afford a $200 wristband.
Hmm.
And so we looked at it and was like, wow, what can we do about this? Because this is 70% unemployment rates. This is going to be a problem.
Hmm.
And so we looked at it. We was like, wow, you know what? What we can do is we can make the phone vibrate, and
Hmm.
that way, if you want a band, you can buy the band and have that, independent experience. Because we found that a lot of people who were blind or visually impaired, they didn't want to hold their phones out. They were afraid that someone might steal it, or they might run into something and break it. So,
Absolutely.
so they didn't want to hold their phone out. So the wristband gave them a bit more like discreetness, let's say.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But it was a free option that you can just like pull out your phone and like anybody in the world can navigate. So that's what we leaned on. And it made such a big difference. And meanwhile, while we were doing that, we were realizing that there were like B2B companies, like, Google, Airbnb,
Hmm.
Uber, Disney parks. It was like, hey, interested in new ways of wayfinding and building accessibility into their physical experiences, right? So right now, if you think of Airbnb, right, everything is you can get the Wi-Fi password for the house in the app, right?
Mhm.
But then to get navigation to the door, I click on the app and it takes me to Google Maps, right? But what if you could just point the phone and it would just vibrate or stop vibrating when you got to the door?
Yeah.
All of a
Mhm.
sudden, like, you have much more user engagement. I was in Disney Park in Paris and, on some research,
Uh-huh.
you know, I love my job.
As
And
you do.
and what happened is that I was walking around. It was the hottest day. It was like 97 degrees Fahrenheit, super hot, not a lot of shade walking around. And, I spent so much time looking at their map. And I was like, wow, they're paying actors like millions of dollars, you know, and a good portion of my time, I'm not even paying attention to them, right? And I was like, wow, what more magical way to walk around the Magic Kingdom than to be guided by vibrations and not have to like take your eyes off of Mickey,
Mhm.
right? And I just felt like we saw an opportunity in that space to kind of like, here's how we can get the app paid for so that we can make it free for the people who are blind and visually impaired. And you can't only make it free for people who are blind and visually impaired, so we just made it free for everybody.
Right.
Mhm.
Wow. Follow-up question that's not on our list. When you were going through the Disney, are you able to say, I want to go visit these parts of the park and then it'll navigate you? Or how did you know, like if it was telling you, oh, nope, don't walk this way and it vibrates, how did you know that to not walk that way, I guess? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
So, Disney actually built a pretty robust navigation system in their app. So you go to Disney parks, they don't want you to leave their experience, right? And
Yeah.
so at first we talked to them, we were like, hey, what if you could, people could download our app in Disney and use it? And they're like, we don't care about that. Like we have stuff, we'd rather them use our stuff. And so we started to look at it as like, how do we integrate our systems into the systems that are already existing?
Hmm.
Now with Disney, we didn't actually do an implementation, but from a theoretical point of view, the way it would work is we'd figure out, because they had all the attractions listed and the GPS locations of them, and they already had a navigation solution. We could just tag that solution and say, instead of looking at this line, make that line a quote unquote haptic experience. And we can trace that line because for our app, we partner with mapping companies. We buy our maps from Mapbox and Google. We don't make the map. What we do is we keep you on the line that the mapping company sends us.
Okay.
So that back in the day, there was actually lots of challenges around that because like sidewalks weren't so well mapped, and like our device used to put people in the middle of the street. Version 1, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But we got it much much better to the point where Google got better and Mapbox got better because people started actually adding sidewalks into the experience.
Hmm.
Part of it because like a big push of that is the autonomous piece, right? Like when you have autonomous robots, they need to know where the
Hmm.
sidewalks are. So all of these pieces are starting to kind of add up together where the map was just constantly getting better. And what we did is the line that the mapping company draws, we keep you on that line.
Okay. Interesting.
hmm
Okay. Let's see what our questions say now. Do forgive. Give me a second here. Okay. So it says haptics has been a game changer for the blind community. We've kind of talked about that a little bit, and we've talked about some examples. But do you have any individuals specifically that you know who have used it and are like, I am way more independent with this? Do you have like some specific in you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, specific use cases.
Yes.
Yes, like a big portion is we have quite a few people who are blind and visually impaired that use our app. And also too, it's like like while the blind piece was a big driver for us, like we have lots of people who are just like directionally challenged that use our app.
Me.
Because like I used to give the pitch, and before I would try to convince people who were sighted that looking at a map was a problem, and I realized that that wasn't the way to go. And then I started talking to people who were blind, and they were like, "Yeah, we know it's a problem.
Hmm.
We've been saying this for like 100 years, So it was
Hmm.
like, oh, got it, cool. You guys, we need to work with you because you get what we're doing, right? And so the funny thing that happened is that the minute we started working with people who were blind and visually impaired, sighted people would come over to me after the meeting, like kind of like embarrassed to be like, well, I'm not blind, but I get lost when I can't tell which way I'm facing when I get out the subway. Can I use their thing to help me? And I was like, yeah, you can totally use it.
Love it.
Right. And so, so from the blind perspective, I think that in that category, it's just, what we've gotten is that like every little bit that's more helps, like, and mapping isn't perfect, what I'm saying? Like technology isn't perfect, but it gives more freedom. It gives a bit more independence. It gives a bit more confidence to
Hmm.
try to tackle that challenge of going out to a new place on your own. And I think that, like if you look at like most of the blind, like if you look at from the blind point of view, like number of places that they go, it's like 5 places, same 5 places usually,
Yep.
because it's like this is the route that I know that I'm comfortable with. And it's like, hey, like meeting your blind friend at a new coffee shop,
Not gonna happen.
not going to happen, like unless you go pick them up, right? And so
Yes.
the mental work that has to be done just on one side versus the other just doesn't compare,
Yeah.
right? And so what we see is that like people who are using the technology, they're it's helping them a little bit. It's helping them a little bit to feel a bit more confident that if something goes wrong while I'm out here, I can figure things out,
Yeah.
and that's been super useful, I think, from the point of view of the consumer.
I agree 100%. It is very scary to go off of my this is where I need to walk. This is the side of the sidewalk I need to walk on. And yeah, very scary.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah, like, and the thing is that none of my core team was blind when we created this, right? I mean,
Hmm.
no one in my core team is blind. We have people on the core team who that we hired later that were blind, but like the co-founders, like I'd never met a person who was blind, so I started a company to help people who were blind,
Hmm.
right? And most people are like, oh my God, was your grandma blind? Like, what was your story? And I'm
Yeah.
like, uh, I wanted to build haptic stuff, and people who were blind know what the word haptic means.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. That's literally the whole. Yep. About how it helps the blind community and makes them feel almost safer to get out and about. And you were talking about your core group of people weren't vision impaired, but you've hired a couple of people who know a little bit more about it.
Hmm.
Did you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, and so like I felt like the insights that we got just from talking to people, like like we met lots of people in the blind and visually impaired community. So like the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind bought
Hmm.
our first 50 bands through a health tech accelerator program called Mass Challenge that we were in. Um, I'm on the board for the Perkins School for the Blind for their How Innovation Center.
Hmm.
Like we've met like the presidents of the American Federation for the Blind,
Hmm.
hung out with the people for National Federation of the Blind, went down to their
Yes.
headquarters to do demos. We work with the Lighthouse Guilds and all the different cities,
Wow.
around. We met Ms. World 2012 because she wasn't blind, but her sisters were blind, and she ran on a blind platform.
Wow.
So like, and we know Paralympians. Really close friend of mine is Markeith Price, 2-time blind Paralympian. I was trying to write a song about uh, what the word haptic means because you know uh, I realized that no one is listening to my my research papers. So maybe a more widely appreciable form of communication that could also be you know co-opted for education would be sufficient. And I happen to be a freestyle rapper. I never actually recorded anything, and I decided like, hey, you should write a song one day. And while I was trying to write a song, I realized that like this is really hard, um, really hard. And I was like, well, if I can make people understand what haptic means, then this work would be worth it. And so we wrote that rap, and I shared it with Markeith. At the time, I had some blind references in the rap, and I just wanted to make sure like I wouldn't get canceled from the blind community. And he was like, "Wow, that's what you're not going to cancel. This is dope." And then he was like, "Oh, and I also make music outside of being a Paralympian and graduating with my IT degree in 4 months in masters." And I'm like, "Dude, how do you have
Huh.
the time?"
What?
But he made the beat, and his third beat that he sent me was it. And now you can listen to the sound on SoundCloud. It's called Haptics. We have a vision.
Cool. We will share that on the screen because it is really cool. I've heard it. So, wow, that is amazing that so many doors opened up just because you just started working with one community. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that we found from a design point of view is that most people go for the mass, but the mass is one is highly competitive
Hmm.
because everyone's going for the largest market, and two, like your solution is one of many, in a sea. But like when you walk into like, as they call quote unquote niche markets, right?
Hmm.
What you'll find is that they're not so well served. And that is a ridiculously huge opportunity for an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's like because it means that you can walk into a market, you have very little competition,
Hmm.
easy to get access to the people that are at the top.
Hmm.
And, if you provide a solution that's viable, they will love the crap out of you and become your evangelist. And
Hmm.
so what we found is that by designing for the quote unquote fringe, it actually makes the process and the product better for everyone in the middle market.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. That is amazing work. Thank you for that because not many people would have thought about doing that. Most of us are just trying to survive in the blind community, I feel like.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, well, like there's because the conversation around the disability part is twofold, right? And I think that like a big part of the challenge has been that like most people are mistakenly thinking that designing disabled products has something to do with philanthropy. Like and there's a lot of goodwill that you can build into products, of course, right? Like as you should.
hmm.
But like what they're missing is that like you know 20% of the world's population has a disability.
Hmm.
That's a lot of money that is being left on the table. And, like what companies really need to realize is that like, like, oh yeah, you could recycle because like you want to save the environment, or you can recycle because like your grocery store gives you like 10 cents, for
Hmm.
everything that you give and you want off of your bill, right? Either way, it doesn't matter. You still are doing better, right? And so, and the planet is doing better. And so what we're looking at is kind of like, how do we tag into those zeitgeists, those that area of interest that allows people to essentially um us to do good but also to get good from doing good, because that is also what should happen in the space. So I think that if we can inspire entrepreneurs that this isn't about philanthropy, this is about like market domination, then the game and the conversation around designing for the disability community completely changes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I hate to like take away the human heart part, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because it is actually really, really important. But it's also like, if we just only like, if people would all do the right thing just because it was the right thing to do,
Hmm.
we wouldn't need laws. We
No.
wouldn't need a lot of stuff that are in place that actually show us what things are to do, right? And so
Yeah.
I think from a long story, um, the goal is build experiences that include the extremities because they're underserved, they're valuable customers, and more importantly, you can create life-changing products for them, which ultimately give you amazing word of mouth. You can't pay for that kind. You literally can't pay
Mm-mm.
for that kind of advertising.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Kelly, did you want to ask the next question? I think we were at question 9.
So let's see. Your social practice class builds on the idea of touch and inclusivity. Sorry, I have trouble with that word.
Yep, yep.
And design. Um, what are you hoping for your students to take away from that course?
Mm, that's a good question. Like, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway, obviously, is kind of that, hey, here's a group of people that um, need design.
Mhm.
And as designers, like, we should go where the needs are the greatest. And so, most people who go into design, I mean, some people go in and it's about the money, right? But most people who are going into design, it's like they want to make something that changes the world.
Right.
They want to have an impact on some part of the world that's important to them, right? Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's being able to like, have a business and raise your kids. Maybe it's, dealing with annoying, calendar invites, right? Like it's every product creator is trying to one usually solve a problem that either they have or someone person to them has. And what I'm hoping to do is to expand because like if you've never had the experience, you don't know that the problem exists.
Right.
And it's really easy to, again, I had never met a person who was blind until I started a company, and I didn't start the company until I was 35. So 35 years of my life, I'd never met a person who was blind, right? It can be really easy for me to believe that, like, yeah, there is a blind person somewhere is one of them, right? Like, not like there's 3% of the population, right? So what I'm hoping to do is just to expose them to different types of ability. And what I'm hoping that that will do is that as they grow as designers and they're building that product, like, hey, what about wheelchair users? Are you going to get into this? Hey, what about people who are deaf? How's this going to work for them? Right? Because like the people who are designing the products and experiences in those rooms, if no one in the room has that experience, there is no one to. It's not even like, oh, they're intentionally being neglectful. They just don't know it's a problem because they've never had the conversation with the people who have the problem. And so what I'm hoping is that, like, well, it'd be nice if a disability person was in every design room, right? Like
Mhm.
multiples, right?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, like one thing that, like I've learned from dealing with the blind community is that, like, if, even people with the same visual condition don't see the same.
Correct.
It's like your vision is like a fingerprint almost, and so it's like, just getting to the space of like, hey, asking people when I meet them, how much vision do you have access to at the moment, right? Like, just so I can know, like, do I need to push all the chairs in, right? Do I, like, how much do I need to help accommodate for what you might not be able to do? And so what I'm hoping is that my students will be those people in those rooms, right? Whether they have a disability or not, they understand enough of the disability story that they're going to bring these conversations into their products, into the workplaces that they go into. And I've had interns that have worked for me that have gone on to Duolingo, have gone on to like Lyft, have gone on to some major organizations, and they're bringing all of this stuff around, because like, that's the super interesting thing about like working and building products for the disability community. Is like, once you're here, you are always here. Even if you're not building a disability product, someone's going to say something. It's going to sound accessible, and it's going to like you're going to feel your arm twitch, like, right, that doesn't sound right. Let me interject. And so I feel like the more people we can just get exposed to the possibilities and the conversations that are happening, the more we have a chance to make more and more products inclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick ad break and we'll be right back.
Life can present challenges, but the whole person believes in turning challenges into triumphs. Our staff is trained to provide compassionate, personalized care that enhances the lives of our consumers, enabling them to live independently and with dignity. The whole person believes in the power of human connection. Our staff extends their reach into vibrant communities, fostering connections and creating moments of joy for every consumer we serve. Whether that's through peer support groups, adaptive sports, employment services, or non-emergency medical transportation, our staff provides exceptional care and become trusted companions and confidants. Your donation will help us continue to expand our programs and services to help people with disabilities remain independent and living in their home. Consider giving a gift today. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone, from our break. We're going to get right into more questions. So this one is a little bit more technical, so I'm going to read from it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It says, your work has been recognized by many institutions like MET, and then I'm going to spell this one out, SXSW, and I know you've done a TED Talk.
Yes.
Can you explain what the first two are and then tell us about your experiences?
Yeah. And so the first is the Met is the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And so I had a fellowship there when I was in grad school. It was the Met Media Lab, and they invited in grad students to explore the museum experience at the intersection of museum and technology. So I worked on a project with them where, at the time, like I was focusing on, again, on my three words, right? Fashion. At the time, it was fashion. I feel like it's more design now, but at the time it was fashion, movement, and technology. And I decided while I was at the Met, like, well, I have these three words that I'm using for my thesis. What if I use the same three words at the Met, right? And so I was like, what I was hoping for was that I'd get some work that I could tie to my thesis that would also tie to the Met, that would make the whole thing more valuable. That didn't necessarily happen exactly that way. But what did happen is that I ended up working on a project with the Costume Institute, and I took garments from the Costume Institute's collection and used 3D modeling software. It was super new at the time called Clo 3D to model the software and the physics of the software. We then worked with motion capture data from a former supermodel, Rena Panteva, and uploaded the data into the system so that it allowed us to basically put the dress on a person so people could see what the dress looked like, quote unquote, in movement, right? And so the idea is that, fashion, I used to sell fashion. I worked at Nordstrom as a previous life. And, fashion is meant to be touched. It's meant to be moved. So like you see a dress, the first thing you do is you grab it and you see how it like falls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone knows not to touch the Picasso, but the Madame V&A dress, everyone wants to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of this time it's like, fashion was built for movement. So seeing it on a static mannequin doesn't necessarily do it justice. But of course, everyone touching it, degrades it for future generations. So I took a really digital approach to how do we maintain conservation but show movement. It was a super fun project. With South by Southwest, which is a tech and music festival based in Austin. And so actually going there in like 2 weeks. Super excited about South by Southwest 2025. But we've been going for years. The first time I went was with my first startup back in 2016. I went again sometime maybe around 2021 or 2022, and I was invited for the pitch competition. I didn't win the pitch competition. Actually, I was an alternate for the pitch competition, and then at the very last second, everyone before me dropped off, and I became main stage. So it was like, hey, you got 10 minutes. Your 1 minute pitch that you're going to do as an alternate is now a 3-minute pitch with a slide deck. Go. And I was like, and we went, and we didn't win. But an amazing thing happened is that South by Southwest had just created a new venture fund. They realized that the companies that have come to South by Southwest, like Twitter, Airbnb, have made billions of dollars. And they saw an opportunity to capitalize and bringing some of the best startups in. So they started to not only have the pitch competition for other investors, but to actually start investing themselves. And so we met with the founder. She was in the crowd, the director of that fund, and we didn't win the award for $4,000, but 2 weeks later we had a $100,000 investment directly from South by Southwest, which is owned by Penske Media, which also owns Billboard, Dateline, and a whole bunch of other companies.
Whoa.
Actually, that piece tied in so great because later, after we did the pitch, we got the investment. The next year comes around, it's 2023, and they were like, hey, you should come do a company update for the pitch awards. And I had my investors, they were in town in New York at the time, and I just wrote the first verse to the Haptics rap, right? And I'll rap the first verse for you just so
Yes,
so you guys know what it is. But
yes.
so I rapped the first verse to them, and I was like, hey, you guys are music people, like honest feedback, right? And it was like, yo, this is awesome. You should come to South by Southwest and perform this as your company update.
Ooh.
So all of a sudden, I went from I'm going to write the first song I've ever written in my whole life and like try to record it to you're going to perform this song in front of 3,000 people at like a major music festival in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, holy crap, right? I was all of a sudden this like little side hobby thing just turned into like, something that could embarrass and ruin my career. I mean, probably not, but I just felt the pressure, like,
Yeah.
and so I was like, wow, I need to really pull this together. And so we ended up going, we got the rap done. And Mark Keith produced the beat, and we went up there and we performed. It went so well that one of the VPs at Penske Media was like, wow, it was amazing. How can I help you out? And I was like, I need a recording studio because like I've recorded this song in my closet and it sounds like trash. And he was like, where are you? I was like, I'm in New York. He sent an email to Billboard like the next week. And then Markeith Price came up from Baltimore like, like his wife helped him like get on an Amtrak.
Hmm.
I picked him up from the station, and then we went to Billboard and we actually recorded the song. So the South by Southwest, the recording that's on SoundCloud was actually recorded at Billboard Music in New York City. So it was just like one of these like crazy moments. And then all of a sudden I was meeting all these people at the conference, and like next thing you know, apparently there's not a lot of scientific based rap. So I started being invited to scientific conferences to like open their conferences with performances. So I went to Rowley in Indianapolis. I went to Innovate in Calgary in Canada. Like as a music performer, which again like, and so while we were making the song, I reached out to some friends of mine because I didn't know how to write a rap to music, and so they helped me out, and ultimately I gave them my co-writing credits. And so what we did is like I had to become like an ASCAP music artist so that I could own the rights to the song.
Hmm.
And then I had to create a publishing company so that I could own the rights to the publishing. So now, outside of, physical therapy gamification, like my company is also an official music publisher. Again, it's like you can't write this stuff, right? And it's like if I had tried, like if I had gone in with like, hey, I'm gonna write a rap and I'm gonna try to end up on South by Southwest stages, like no way any of this would have worked out. It would have been the dumbest idea ever, but like somehow serendipitously, like I end up on that stage and it was amazing. So like actually I reached out. There's a Haptics conference in Hamburg in September that I really want to go to.
Yeah.
And I don't really have the money to pay for it. So I called them and I was like, hey, I did a haptic rap. You have a haptic conference. I'd be happy to perform it. And it was like, we'd be happy to talk to you.
I love it so much.
So sometimes I think that like one of the, and it's funny because we're at the whole person, right? And one of the things the other thing that I teach my students really hardcore is that, like you have to bring all of yourself to your work,
Mhm.
right? You know what I'm saying? Like there was no one who could have wrote that haptic rap other than me. Like who else can rap and knows haptics?
No
So all of a
one.
sudden, again, like inside these niche markets, right? These weird combinations of things that don't necessarily go so well. You find these fantastic solutions that somehow work well for everybody, right? Like, and so now when I perform this rap, everyone knows what the word haptic means when I walk off the stage. And from my point of view, it's like, I used to walk into a room and say, how many people know what haptic means? It was 2 people. Now, I walk out of a room after I rap, like how many people know what haptic means? And 1,000 people raise their hand. I'm like, I've done my job.
Hmm.
Right. So I'll rap the first verse for you real quick. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So let's see. Doom. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision. Elevate and touch to the level of sight and sound. And that's our mission. Research spending. Today is access tomorrow for all of our children. Look at the spending. Over the last 100 years, spread over each of the 5 of our senses. Seeing is believing. Yup, most went the vision, second went the sound, which is pretty far distant for 100 years. Money only spent on 2 senses. Isn't that senseless? That is just senseless. Here's my 2 cents in. Vision is king and touch is in prison. Patriarch of all the senses is sight. Who really made that decision? Who the F made that decision? No one with limited vision, none of the 285 million, and wasn't hearing the 460 million folks with limited hearing. Digital, so sight and sound driven that it left like a billion on the wrong side of a digital divide with virtually no pot to piss in. The future is touch, that's our mission. I am haptics, touch with the weight and intention of dramatically making a difference. You need to listen. We have a vision, right? And so
Hmm.
that's kind of like the first verse of the track, right? And it's like the whole point was like, really, how do we hammer in all the research, all of the insights, and
Yeah.
smash it into a 3-minute thing that rhymes, right? It was a lot of fun. And actually, funny thing enough is, me and Marquise we're pretty close, and so after we did the song and it went so well, he was like, yo, we should make an album, man. We might win a Grammy. I was like, yo, dude, you're going way, you're going way too far, man. But now I'm like, actually, there's more stuff to talk about,
Yeah.
right? So we're actually having conversations on potentially doing some more collaborations.
Very cool. Oh my gosh. I am not that talented, so good for you guys. That is amazing. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Kelly, what question would you like to ask next?
See. How can designers and entrepreneurs create business models that are not just innovative but equitable and inclusive?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. Like equitable and inclusive. I think that ultimately, like as an entrepreneur, we're serving a customer.
Hmm.
Like if you're not serving a customer, you just have a really expensive hobby, right? So someone needs to be paying for your services,
Mhm.
right? And I think that understanding who those people are and what their needs are, their varied needs are, right? Because more than likely you don't have one type of customer. You have quite a few that might fall into a boat, right? And so I think that like the best thing that you can do from a point of view of building equity is like to really understand who your users are, and then the variety that they come in, and try to do what you can to make sure that there's a pathway for every type of person to be able to show up at the table. Like one of my friends, visually impaired, he was like, he's like, I don't need the same information. He's like, I want access to the same information. I don't need it in the same way,
Hmm.
and so, one of the pieces that when we talk about accessibility, right? Like my biggest famous example is the brush tool and Adobe, right? And Photoshop,
Mhm.
right? Like if you're using the brush tool, you have the icon in the corner that you can click. You can like hit the B button and like get the brush. You can like go to the menu. You can like pull the floating menus over the side and have you like there's like 1,000 different ways to access the brush tool. And when I first was doing this, I was like, why is Adobe wasting all of my money building like 20 different ways to do the same thing? But what I realized, or what I didn't realize at the time, what I realize now is that Adobe knew who their customers were. Like most artists are neurodivergent, right? So some people need the visual icon. Some
Mhm.
people need like the hierarchical structure of knowing like exactly where in the outline that the thing is. Some people need the floating thing that's like sitting there, right? Some people want the keyboard shortcut.
Mhm.
And by catering to all those audiences, they became the default and the de facto standard.
Mhm.
So I think that like a lesson from Adobe is like build multiple access points to the same thing so that people have different ways to achieve the same result.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's a lot to process.
It is, but also it's like it's so simple too.
It is.
Like
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, well, here's one way, right? And usually the way you build is the way you would do it
Hmm.
because that's the most intuitive for you, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you do some user research and you get some other people's feedbacks and you realize that, like, oh, like for me, I was like, let's gamify physical therapy. And I started doing research, and half of my surveys were like, game things and badges and points don't incentivize me at all.
Hmm.
So I was like, oof,
Yeah.
like, what am I going to do, right? Because, I don't want half the population, right? I want everyone.
Hmm.
So I'm like, well, now I'm looking at like, well, what if I applied incentives or perks? And what if it was like, maybe it was points and badges, and maybe those points added up to like something you could do in the real life that was important to you. Like
Hmm.
maybe you get $5 off your T-Mobile bill, or what I'm saying, like they did with recycling, right?
Hmm.
And that promotes you to do more physical therapy, which ultimately, makes your life better and lowers the cost for everyone else who's supporting your life, right? So we were looking at like these ways of like, how do you start from yourself, of course, because it's the easiest you have, it's the most information you have access to. But then how do you expand and how do you make sure? Because, like, yeah, the gamers are going to love it. But like, if you're not a gamer,
Hmm.
all of my theories aren't going to work on you. Right. So how do we make something that's more universal, more acceptable? And, that's kind of, now you can start in the niche, right? And kind of like focus, I'm going to start on the gamer part first and then grow that and expand it to others. Or you can open up with how do you build, for, the different people and the different possibilities. But I think ultimately, like considering the variety of different types of people in your customer base and making sure that they can all get to the table is just the best way to do it.
Hmm.
Like that. Everybody getting to the table.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Hmm. Wow. Okay, let me ask the next question here real quick. Um, what role do you think Kansas City can play in pushing forward with accessibility, and what is the impact driven design?
Yeah, Kansas City stands in a really awesome place where it's, I come from the East Coast. It's like, you can hit Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington D.C. all within a 5-hour drive from like where I lived. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
the ecosystem here, but like Kansas City is the major city of the area.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden what you get is you get a city that can become the example for the communities around it and how to do things. And I think that that's the power that the city has, that Kansas City has, is because like the areas around us, they're looking at us, like to kind of see like how we're doing things and like implementing them there. So I think that like serving serving the populations really well here, by being the example of what's possible around, from accessibility, from equity, from inclusivity, gives the surrounding area, it gives a chance to kind of bubble out. And again, I feel like once you're in the space where you're working in this world of, inclusion, equity, disability, accessibility, right? Once you're in these areas, you can never leave them. And so as people from Kansas City grow, move out to the suburbs, right? Move further away, get other jobs in different areas, they take the pieces and the skills that they've learned here and they bring them into their organizations. And so I think that the biggest piece is that, and in the space of fashion, New York is always looked at as an example, right? I think that like Kansas City can become the example of, accessibility for the Midwest. And I think there's a super huge opportunity, not only for the city and its branding, because again, right, like the South Loop project that's going on right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's transforming the game from the point of view of how accessible it was, right? And unless accessibility isn't just about ability, right? Accessibility is also about cost,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have access to your $1 million jet, not yet.
I was
Hopefully.
like, yet.
Not yet, exactly, right? But like when I moved here and I got on a bus and I asked the lady how much it cost, and she laughed. I was like, what the hell was going on? I'd never seen anything like this in my life, right? And all of a sudden, like public transportation is accessible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you just jump on the thing that shows up, right? So
Yep.
I think that we're already on a way, and of course, there's always more to do, right? There's always going to be more to do, and we don't want to get like hung up on the more to do. We just want to kind of like set up incremental process to kind of like, okay, now we've checked that box, next box to check,
Mm-hmm.
right? And by doing so, we get to show everyone else around how the check boxes, when you check the boxes, how it actually makes better for not just the people you're checking boxes for, but everyone around those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And South Loop is a perfect example, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a perfect example.
Yeah. It's a big project, though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I keep knocking this cord, guys. Sorry. Ugh. Kelly, did you want to ask the next question?
Sure. What advice would you give to artists, designers, or entrepreneurs, looking to make their work more inclusive?
Talk to the people that you want to include and then listen to them.
Right.
Yeah,
Pretty
I mean,
Pretty simple.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
the thing is that, like so much is just listening. And,
Mhm.
like, because there can be a tendency when you walk in, especially, you're a tech founder, you're like, I know this tech, I know how to do this, right? And
Mhm.
then, or a designer, I know how this should be done, or maybe an artist, I know what I want to paint, I know what this art piece should look like. And then you listen to people, but you're not actually listening to them so that you can influence your work. You're listening to them so that you can get consensus that they agree with what your original plan was. So most people walk in and like, hey, here's my idea. It's great, isn't it? Tell me how great it is. That's basically what they're asking you,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I think that like when you walk in and you say, hey, if you walked into a museum, what would feel inclusive for you? Right? There's this amazing book called The Mom Test. I just finished reading it. It's fantastic. It talks about how to ask questions that are so straightforward and real that even your mom can't lie to you. Like, hey, mom, is this business great? I love you, son. This is awesome, right? That's mom's answer, right? Literally, that's my mom's answer all the time. Like, but hey, mom, I noticed that when you go to the supermarket, you never buy this thing anymore. Any particular reason why? Oh yeah, well, because I don't really like the way it is, and because they put it on the top shelf and it's really heavy, and me reaching for the top shelf, it doesn't work for me. All of a sudden, there's an insight there because like, and they don't even need to know that they're being interviewed. You can just ask questions that are just curious about how they're doing things in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the most awesome thing: the more questions you ask, the greater of a conversationalist the person that you're talking to will believe that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, we all just want to talk about ourselves, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, so giving other people the chance to just do that. And then the key thing is listening, right? You know, like so many times it can be like, oh, well, they said, okay, we know better, right? And I think that like we don't, because we didn't have people on our team who were blind in the beginning, we didn't have enough experience to know better. So we just had to believe with 100% that like whatever this person is telling me about their lived experience is just true. And then just build off of that as if that's the reality. So I think that like asking the people you want to include, and then like actually listening to what they say, and then changing your scenario or solution to include pieces that, because again, like you don't go to the supermarket and buy everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
You buy what you need,
Sometimes.
right? I mean, sometimes, but you buy what you need. So there might be pieces that they're connecting with that you don't need for your product, but the pieces that do resonate, like to listen and just to make changes, and then the other pieces is to incorporate them in the conversation. Because once you do the change, like bring them back in and be like, yo, hey, I did this. What do you think?
Mhm.
All of a sudden, like, even if what you've built is trash, like the goodwill that you'll build from like people who actually believe that like you took what they said and then went and go did it. Went to go do it. Went and go did it. Went to go do it.
I wasn't gonna say anything. I was like,
And like all of a sudden it's like, wow, these people are serious. Like they really want to. And all of a sudden, like doors just start opening because it's like, well, wait, you should talk to. I know.
Mhm.
And then that avalanche of like, wow, these people really listen, and like they're really trying. Even if you're not successful, it just the community again is like so open and like like to people who want to contribute to it. That even if you get it wrong, but you're trying to get it better, like people will
Be
they'll
receptive.
yeah they'll be
Mm-hmm.
receptive to you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of reaching into counselor territory. My counselor instincts are like, yes, just listen. People will tell you their whole life, if you just listen and you don't always have something to say. Like maybe they're not looking for a solution. They just want somebody to listen, and then you can present the solution later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
or what I like to do is just present more questions. Like, wait,
Yeah.
oh, like, oh, this is so annoying. I would really wish. Why did you wish that?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't this thing already have that? That doesn't work for you?
Yeah.
Why not? Right? Like, just get curious about people, and I think that like they'll open up when they see that the curiosity is genuine.
Hmm.
Especially, I feel like the disability community is like ridiculously receptive to people who want to contribute.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the disability community, not many people are willing to listen.
Mm.
So
We can
you're doing
transform
good
that.
work. You're doing good work.
We can do better.
We could do better. We just need a sticker.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. You like, you know why we should do better? Because it's more money in doing better.
You were not wrong. You were not wrong.
Like again, I love philanthropy, right? But like at the end of the day,
You still have to pay your bills.
you got to pay your bills, and
Mhm.
it's fiscally responsible for your organization to listen to the different varied voices in your customer base and to respond to it appropriately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's look at the last question here. Okay, so how can our listeners stay connected with you and your work and support the future of your innovations? All of them, because you have so many.
Yes. So first, you can visit. So okay, here we go. I got something.
Okay.
I'm actually doing some research right now and taking some surveys. And I need about 200 people to fill out my surveys, and I only have 40 right now. So if you have ever done any type of physical or occupational therapy and you're open to share about your experience in a 12-question survey, you can go to www.movement9.com And here's a survey for you. We're going to build an experience that tries to take into account the different types of people that are in physical therapy. And by definition, the ability range is very, very varied. So we'd love to get any type of physical therapy, get your thoughts on it. How'd you doing it? Did you do all your physical therapy? No judgment, but our goals is to figure out how we can get people to do more of their physical therapy so that they can have better outcomes.
Yeah.
You can also find me on at thehaptic9.com. That's THEHAPTIC9.com. There is kind of like the overall company website, and you can link directly to any of my contacts there. And then also, I have a link tree that has all my social medias and emails, so you can reach out to me there directly at www.linktr.ee/Keithius, KEITHIUS.
Perfect. And we'll share all of that on our screen so everybody can see that. Just for
Fantastic.
a different way of getting information. So
Thank you. One thing I'd like to add really quickly.
yes.
So I'm working on a few projects with some students at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Mhm.
One is after connecting with the accessibility team here at the Nelson Atkins Museum, I realized, and meeting you at the Blind Touch Tours, which was like a fantastic experience. I
Yes.
realized that wow, the biggest challenge for the Blind Touch Tours and making the museum more accessible for people with a visual ability is the number of artworks that have the capability of being touched.
Mhm.
As a big whole, right? And so now
Mhm.
they do have a substantial number of works that can be touched, but it's not the whole museum,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the things I started to look at was like, how could we expand the touch tours?
Mhm.
So I worked with the Kansas City Art Institute, and they funded 4 interns to work with me on a project to. It's called Reimagine Accessibility. And what we're doing is we have 4 students who are going into the Nelson Atkins Museum. They're looking at the permanent collection,
Mhm.
and they're looking at artworks that how to translate those artworks into tactile experiences.
Mhm.
And so a bit of it is interpretation, right? Because obviously a painting is a one-dimensional thing. It was never meant to be three-dimensional,
Mhm.
right? So there's a bit of interpretation, but ultimately, I'm having the students like research the lives of the artists to understand their process in making. So it becomes like a deep delve into art history of the
Mhm.
person and their process, and then to bring in any insights from what they found from that person that could be used to make a tactile representation of the artwork in some way.
Mhm.
So super question mark on like where it's going to go. That's the thing about experiments, is that
Love it.
you don't know how the cake is going to taste until it comes out the oven.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But like what we're doing so far is pretty amazing. The students are doing fantastic work, and I feel that we're going to have an exhibition as part of the Kansas City Art Institute end of year show.
Mhm.
We'd love to have you all come by, hang out, and touch the artwork.
Yes.
And then our plan is that we're going to donate the pieces after the exhibition to the Nelson Atkins Museum, so that they can use the pieces potentially in their blind touch tours. And so going forward, like a big part of because my fellowship with Kansas City Art Institute ends in May, but a big part of what I like my legacy to be here is I'd like this internship to continue, because
Mhm.
if we got 4 pieces of art tactile every semester, right, in 15 years, like we could do the whole museum.
Mhm.
Maybe it's more than 15 years. I know there's hundreds of pieces of artwork, right? But we slowly expand, and more importantly, what it is like it's bringing in students again at at another level of accessibility to like understand like how are they going to represent this
Mhm.
this flat piece of work into a 3-dimensional experience that is capable. And the big thing I'm really big on is I don't want an interpretation necessarily. Or
Okay.
I do want an interpretation. I don't want it to be like, oh, I was inspired by this artwork, so I made this other artwork that has nothing to do with this artwork. It's like, no,
Mhm.
I want it to be from the point of view of a person who's blind. I want them to feel that what you've put down is representative of what is available in
Mhm.
some way. And
Mhm.
so we're exploring those. And actually, Haley, while we're here, I'm going to
Uh-oh.
have you
Uh-oh.
I'd like to have you come and talk to my students and become our advisors so that we actually do a great job and like, don't get canceled. So if you're open, no pressure on the air.
I mean,
Is that a yes?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just know that I'm going to trip over my words and I'm going to be super nervous.
That's
but
fantastic. That's
it'll
fantastic.
be done.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to build the community. You know what I'm saying? So,
yes. Yes.
So I think that's going to be really, really an exciting piece. And I'm hoping that, again, like the students are already taking so much from just digging into the process of like, so I have one student, who's working on a Kandinsky painting. Right, and if Kandinsky is like, he's from the Bauhaus era. Everything is kind of like shapes and superposed. It's like super flat, right?
Okay.
And she's like, first she started trying to build a sculpture, and she's like, I think the circle could be a sphere, but then she made a sphere, and she's like, it doesn't feel right. So now I think the sphere needs to be a disc, right? And so now it's like she's bringing in because the front view has to be perfect, right? It's representational, but the other 5 views are creativity, our expression, right? And how to do that. And so it's been really interesting watching them go through the process of trying to figure out what is the best way to represent this piece in the different types of ways that this piece can even be represented. So I think that what I'm really excited about is that, like, again, these are artists, these are designers, right? And so when they start designing, the first thing they're going to think about is like, okay, I should probably build a tactile part of the experience that people can touch. Right? Maybe we get to a point where everyone who submits an artwork also submits a tactile representation, right? So I had a conversation with a professor, Kevin Dimery. He has a piece that's over in the Nelson Atkins right now. He's these beautiful like sculptures. They're really big. Like it's kind of like I forget what they call it. Not a mobile, but like almost like a chandelier in a way, but like like all on a string and they move around.
Yeah.
And so he has a big one. I saw that and I was like, wow. So I was like, hey, Kevin, do you have smaller versions of these? Because I could give them to the Accessibility Museum and then your piece could be on the Blind Touch Tour.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I can make a smaller one. And it was like, it wasn't that it was just, no one ever thought to ask him.
Yeah.
So it was like, how many artists already have, right? Because right now I'm having students reinterpret artists who, may or may not be living, right? But like, if the artists put their tactile piece in with their thing, then all of a sudden it's as close to representation as you can get, right? So I'm not sure if that's going to be a thing or not, but I would love for it to become a thing.
I would too. That would be amazing. And just for those who don't know, I worked with the Nelson to provide a tactile tour for the people who are blind and low vision. That's kind of my role here at The Whole Person, is just to provide those experiences. And so Keith, that's how Keith and I met previously, because he was very interested in what that looked like and how to expand it now. So that's amazing.
Yeah. So we're really excited. And I had to move really quickly on this. So the Nelson Atkins wasn't able to officially join, but we're in conversations to have them officially join starting next semester. So
it's amazing.
Provided the pilot goes well.
Yeah. I have nothing but good wishes towards that. I think it'll work out well for you.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Well, if it's all right with you, we're going to go ahead and close this interview out. We are so thankful for you coming and explaining things that we don't understand in ways that we can understand. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Definitely a wealth of information today. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to step out of the lab and actually talk to humans.
Love
and
it.
share what it is that you're working on. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, you're welcome anytime. And please send us updates. We'll kind of keep an eye on that, and maybe we'll have you back on and you can share your updates from there. Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I would love to bring the students on once they're further along to have them talk specifically about their experiences. I think it could be super valuable. But
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. All right. Thanks.
We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision. Elevate and touch to the level of sight and sound, and that's our mission. Research spending. Today is access tomorrow for all of our children. Look at the spending. over the last 100
All right,
years.
everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our podcast. Today, Kelly and I are going to go through some of our monthly events at The Whole Person. Kelly, did you want to go first?
Sure. Our first event is going to be Getting Social, which is the first Friday of each month. And this is open to all of our consumers who have disabilities.
All right, the next event is Time to Spare. It's the third Wednesday of every month. This is our accessible bowling event for anyone who has a disability.
All right. And our next group is going to be Mind's Eye View, which will be the first Monday of each month. This is a support group for blind and low vision consumers.
The next one will be our DIY youth event, 18 to 24. It is the last Wednesday of the month.
All right, and our next group is going to be our brain injury support group. And this meeting takes place every second Thursday of the month.
All right. And then the next one is the Tech Talk every second Monday of the month. This is a forum online for individuals who are vision impaired or blind to get together and talk a little bit more about some of the technology.
All right, and if you guys want any more information, please visit our website at thewholeperson.org.
Thank you, everyone.